So the, come on, nah. I'm just kidding. Class is starting now. So this is a session on, we've all developed materials, whether it's Excel or Excel courses, using Excel for we're using Excel for our courses or Excel-based courses. So it's basically going to be a lot of, I'll call them panelists, but have material that we're willing to provide, or we'll talk about courses that were developed. So we have Na from the University of Arizona, and I believe I put this in the actual order that I put your slides as well. So we'll have a few minutes, say 5 to 10 minutes of us telling you about our material, and then we can open it up to questions and have more of a panel discussion and any ideas that people have if they want to see more material or yeah, open to sharing ideas. So we have Na, we have Julianne from North Carolina State, we have Andrew from University of Wisconsin-Madison, Misty from University of Florida, John from University of Florida, and then Jennifer joining us on Zoom from the University of Florida. And then I am from the University of Nevada, Reno. So we'll go in this order. Na, I'll let you go first. And sorry for making you stand up
here. Hi, Jennifer online. I'm just joking with Misty because in the earlier session, I'm going first and I literally takes half the time, I guess. But no, this one will be fast, I promise. So I only have one slide. So I think that's, oh, here we go. Yeah, when Catherine has this idea to kind of gathering this Excel teaching and practices. So basically, the first thing came to my mind is that I teach a 1 credit Excel class. So there is two kind of perspective of this. First is 1 credit hours. I feel like it does provide the flexibility in our curriculum design. Actually, we have our work going on with Joey. Joey is here in the audience from UT Martin, and Rekna also from UT Martin, as well as Maria from Louisiana State. We are trying to basically focus on the 1 credit module courses to see how students' perceptions are for the 1 credit hour, and will students feel beneficial to offer more, to be trained or to be in those more of the 1 credit hours to train skills like Excel or other skills like communication or other kind of industry demanding skills while it's not fully a 3 credit class. So that is this 1 credit hour model, what we call it learning by hours. And so when we think about 1 credit hour, I think it's a good kind of complementary to our full 3 credit class, to the way that it contributes to the program learning outcome, and also provide the flexibility both on the student side, that students can combine different credit hours and to have flexibility to take a 1 credit or 2 credit or combine even 3 together. And also the flexibility to the faculty side on their prep and on their offering. So that is the idea of it. So Excel is a natural fit to this 1 credit kind of practicum or 1 credit hour course idea. This links back to yesterday, one session that I was in with Julianne on graduate student teaching. So the idea of this class is really come from as a graduate students that I want to seek some teaching experience, but I don't have full time to comment on the 3 credit hour. So 1 credit course becomes a great practice for me to develop my teaching skill. Now, the first ever class I developed is this 1 credit hour class on Excel. So the idea is really come from the demand from our TA back then in Kentucky, that they were TAing for this fund manager class, a large class. They always have a 1 credit actually lab components, which is using Excel solve those financial and fund management problems. But the TA is saying that the students really lacking the basic Excel skill to take on those projects. So I'm like, okay, let me feel the need. Let me create this 1 credit hour class, focus on Excel skills. However, when I do the course design, because it's not, essentially it's Excel skills. However, that we are learning Excel in agriculture economic field. So I want to tag the Excel with the related topic question that in our field. So there is topics like farm incomes, food consumer behavior, food price volatility, and all this coming from the real data from the ERS, so that students are working on Excel with a problem in mind. They are question driven, working on the real ERS data. And another component besides Excel is the statistics part. So even though they are standalone 1 credit class, but Excel is just a tool for us to extract those statistical information from the raw data. So I do need to, because there's 1 credit, no prerequisite, I do need to tag along those to statistics concepts, which is laid out on the left table. There is statistical description, map it with the Excel skills so that students can make the link among the 3 things. What are the relevant questions in the agriculture economics I'm trying to answer in this with the data? What are the statistic indicator statistics I'm using to answer the question, and what Excel functions and skills to use to create that statistic to answer the question. So that is the idea, to really have a standalone 1 credit hour course that prepares students basically for their advanced class, but a little bit concentrated to train their skill also on the research, related research to real data, to their data analytics skills with Excel. So with that, I will stop for the session. Catherine, on the sharing part, I will share my course syllabus to the pool, and for us to all kind of learn together. Am I on time? Nice. Thank you.
I'm Julian Treem from North Carolina State University, and I won't kind of repeat the motivation for why we need an Excel class. It's horrific student skills coming in, not even being able to add numbers together. I've had people on the first day bring out their calculator to do these things, and now I know that's where our starting point is. So we created a 3 credit hour course. It is an elective, and it's for sophomores. So ideally they take our intro class, and then the next semester they take this class. Then they feed into 301 and analytics down the line. So that's kind of where we hope that it kind of goes in terms of placement. Students really like this class, and I don't think it has anything to do with me, like as a teacher. The content, what they learn, and they see how it's applied, I don't have to sell it. I mean, if you can do this, you will be more efficient, you'll be more effective. People will think you're smarter than you really are, which is kind of what you're going for early on. So it just has all these positives, and it makes, as a teacher, it's fulfilling, but it also, even, you just don't have to sell it, which is to me like one of the better parts of it. Okay, structure of the course. So we do, it's 2 times a week, usually Tuesday, Thursday. Each time we have classwork, and it took me a while to get comfortable with teaching this kind of course because it is completely different than any other course I teach. So for a while, I'm doing the skills up here and I'm showing them how it's working, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel very uncomfortable doing this because I feel like I'm going so slow. The first day, half of the people got lost, and I wasn't doing anything ambitious. I didn't think so. I still don't think so. And so I thought, okay, we do it step by step. And in the end, they have their own little small application that they can finish on their own. And then they turn in those spreadsheets each week. And it's a pain to grade. I mean, you know, going through spreadsheets, making sure that they've done what they're supposed to do. That's not exactly like the most exciting work I've ever done. If I don't do that, a lot of them won't finish though. And that accountability, if you don't, this is the thing I tell them the most, if you don't use it, you lose it, and you can lose it in 48 hours. So we have to continue to do this, and you have to do this every time. And if you don't, it's a 0 and you just move on. So the classwork I think is super important. We have basic concept quizzes, which basically gives them short scenarios, very easy. If this happens, what function would you choose? What would be the right one to choose in this situation? 10 questions. If you followed it all, you should be fine. We have Microsoft Office specialist quizzes, and I do one of those per week. One of the things that we're trying to do is generate students that can go out and easily pass these MOS criteria so that they can put this on their CV. And I tell them, just because somebody says that they're really good at Excel on their CV means nothing. You need something to back that up. So doing, preparing them with these multiple choice quizzes every week on those concepts, we now have students that go out and they get these certifications and they're like, that was so easy. Like I knew how to do everything on there. And then they get to put that on their CV. So this type of class prepares them for that kind of certification, which is super useful later. They have a project once a week. So I'll talk a little bit more about the projects on a different slide, but just as an example, I'm always looking for kind of the fresh data. We looked at the trade board bird and we looked at MFP impacts by state, and I put all the skills basically in one of the projects that we were working on through the whole semester. So this is everything kind of that we've done. Can you get external data from the web or PDF? PDF probably is more, I can't remember if that was PDF or web, but XLOOKUP, it's the fresher part, the counterpart of VLOOKUP. So if you haven't done XLOOKUP, blows your mind how much better it is. But anyways, pivot table, pivot chart, and mapping tools. Okay, here you have all this data. Can you put it in a map? Can you, tell a story about it? Why are you putting it in a map? What do you hope people will get out of that? So the projects that they do are putting the skills together that we've done up until that particular moment, rather than this week we're doing this skill, next week we're doing a different skill, but I'm not actually going to make you use any of the skills that we've learned previously. I just stole my thunder on a different slide, but that's okay. Exams, I do 3 a semester, and then I do a job interview, just 1 a semester. And I'll talk more about that on a different slide. I love this. The students have gotten a lot out of it. I've gotten really, really positive feedback. So this class we're using as a prerequisite for our analytics class, because I can jump into so much more stuff in analytics once they've taken this class. It's also a great precursor to intermediate micro, optimization problems. All that stuff fits in so easily. I'm going to skip this. If you guys want it, you can have my syllabus. They're the learning outcomes. It's the stuff I think that you would expect. There's nothing like earth shattering on there. I just don't want to go over on my time, but anybody can have it that wants this. Challenges, big challenges. Mac versus PC. If you've ever done this class, that's the biggest challenge. My previous solution was Mac users were supposed to install Windows using Boot Camp. And I still had people that resisted doing it, but those that did it, they were like, oh, it's the same thing, which was kind of the point. New problem. Newer Macs can't run that Boot Camp version. They have to do like a Parallels program, and that costs money, and it takes up a lot of space. And they were like, no, I'm not going to put this on my computer. And so everything I did in class, they didn't know how to do, and it was very stressful. So we worked with, I don't even know what you call them, but whoever comes up with programs, I can't think of the name right now. You guys know what I mean, the program people, whatever. Yeah, like the software department, basically. We have a virtual computing lab, and they actually made a link so that you don't have to go in and make the reservations. I don't know if you guys have that. That's a pain and takes a long time. They made a link where after you log in the first time, it just comes up automatically. So now everybody can just do the link, even if you have a Mac. You do the link and you're running Office 365. Is it perfect? No, because keyboards. The keyboards are different, and all of a sudden I'll be like, control, where's that? Command, sorry, command. So the keyboard, I don't know a really, really good way to get around that. It is what it is. My computer is Windows. I have to use, when I don't have to use it, I like Windows. I mean, I could do a Mac. At some point I might be forced to do that, but it's not to that point quite yet. But what did I do? I got an undergraduate TA that had taken my class one time that used a Mac. And that person went through, and all of my instructions, he made it for Mac. So I have the duplicate instructions now, and it's really not that big of a deal. They just have to remember to open it. But the Mac versus PC is the biggest thing if you don't already address it early. Retaining knowledge, just talking to Catherine, I would feel so good. Like, they know this now. They can do this. Pivot chart, pivot table. You can wow people with a pivot table in a meeting. The next week, it was like I'd never mentioned it. Or you know, VLOOKUP. I mean, you teach that and you're like, they've got it. They never get it. They just never get VLOOKUP, which is another, if you don't know XLOOKUP, so much better, so much more versatile. You don't have to have all the columns right beside each other. It's like wonderful. So, but in any way, they weren't retaining any of the knowledge, which is why everything now is spaced out retrieval practice. Like one more minute. Okay. Everything's spaced out retrieval practice. So while I can't practice, I can't make them practice every single skill that we've done in every single project, everything is recycled at least 4 or 5 times through. And some of it I do every single week. Data validation, they cannot remember how to do that. They don't do the equal sign. Everything's just, it goes to hell. So data validation is something I do almost every single week. A lookup function, they do every single week. Just making tables and charts, for some reason, this takes forever to learn. Every single week, they're doing some different part of it. And that has made the biggest impact, I think, in terms of what they're taking from the class, but also what they can do quickly. Sometimes people can do the skills, but it takes 40 minutes. And it doesn't, if it takes you that long, it's too long. There's a certain amount of time it should take to do these skills. And yeah, Google is out there and you can always go Google it, but you can't Google it in your job for every single thing. At some point, you just have to know it. And so that's what I try to preach to them. The interleaving is really just mixing up the skills. And they hate it, but I call it Excel cocktails. So here's an Excel cocktail. You need to do this and this and this together to create an invoice for someone. And so that's, those are the skills you put together. I don't tell you, use data validation, then use this. I say, here are the components of the invoice. You need to figure out what to do with these. And that's sort of my cocktail. And I promise, Kevin, this is it. The job interview, it is time consuming. I do 7 to 10 minutes per person. And I give them the last 3 weeks in which we can schedule it over a long period of time, because your really good students can do it pretty early. The students, though, would say that employers really wanted to discuss the class in their job interviews, and then they felt stuck because they felt like they knew a lot, but they weren't able on the spot to remember everything. So they gave me the questions, and we created this job interview. And so one of them, like, I'm not going to read all of these, but your secretary needs to enter client names, and they frequently make spelling errors. To avoid this, what would you do? So somebody gave them that kind of scenario to see if they really knew Excel. So they were able to say, oh, this, I would do data validation, for instance, in order to make sure that they could go through it and do what they needed to do. So I think the job interview, it's really fulfilling to hear them talk about it and to be able to be knowledgeable about it. And you can make sure that they are knowledgeable. And if they're not, you can kind of help them. TikTok famous. This is my future. Hopefully I'll be TikTok famous. I'm not sure, because then I could quit. and I could just do these. Dancing hasn't worked. So I think Excel TikToks, my students love TikTok and they want to do Excel TikTok tutorials. If you don't follow Excel on TikTok, you should. There's a ton of awesome content on here and it comes through and you're like, yes. So my students want to do TikTok tutorials. So that's going to be something that we do next year. And I think it's going to be pretty exciting. So that's what's on tap. I know I'm out of time, but if you have any questions, or you want my syllabus or anything else, please feel free to email me.
Thank you. I've got an Excel cocktail for you. So unlike the other speakers, I'm talking about a very specific assignment that I'm going to be sharing with, and hopefully these will be available through AATR is my understanding. So just a little bit of background here. I teach an undergraduate course, pretty upper level. It's the closest thing to econometrics we require of our students. And this assignment comes about halfway through the semester. And what I really want to provide is something that if you're doing a lot of this stuff anyway, here's a ready-made Excel cocktail that's scaffolded well for students. So the two sort of heavy-duty skills that are involved here are linear regression in Excel, which we all know we shouldn't really be doing that, but I also teach them R, and at the end of the semester when they do a project, what do they use? Excel. And then some linear programming with the solver tool. So the main way that this assignment is scaffolded is the main question is a linear programming problem where students are told they own agricultural land in 3 counties, they're going to grow some corn, and then they have an ethanol refinery, and they're self-sourcing, they're growing and self-sourcing the inputs for their ethanol refinery. They need X amount of corn, and they're going to apply fertilizer in prescribed amounts, but they don't know how much yield they're going to get off of each of the 3 fields. And so they get a data set for each of the 3 counties of similar fields with different applications of fertilizer. And so the first step is to use regression analysis to predict the yield that they will get from each of those 3 fields, given the inputs that they're told that they have. And then they have all the information they need to solve the linear programming problem. And the way that this is set up on my end is I have the data, I have sort of a master solution Excel sheet, and the answers are scaffolded so that for a grader or myself, if they get the first answers wrong, you can plug in those wrong numbers to the solver and see if they got the linear programming part right or not. So it's well scaffolded for grading. Let's see. The main challenges, I think, so the first is, at least in my context, I find that students can generally, usually they can run the regression because I'm not giving them too many variables and they have to choose which ones. It's like there are 5 variables in this data set, you're gonna run the regression of all 5, they can usually run the regression. Sometimes they have a challenge of getting the predicted value out of that, how to turn the coefficients into a prediction. So that's something you can work individually on earlier in the semester, but this is where being able to use wrong values in the second step of grading is really important. And then the other thing that I find is just that these large solvers in Excel, they're hard to scaffold the setup, right? You sort of have to set the whole thing up and hit go, and you get lots of different answers. So that's another way of asking for the answers a bunch of different things so that if they get one thing wrong, some of the other things might be right or not. If people have input about really good ways to scaffold the building of a solver for a linear programming problem, I think that's an area where I could use even more insight. But this is a nice way to sort of build on these building block skills earlier in the semester in a way that better approximates the multi-step thinking that we want our students to get to. So I'll stop talking there and answer any questions at the end or be in conversation, but hopefully this is useful to someone somewhere. Thank you.
for you. No, so I did not prepare very much, but if you want, you can look at this project that I created. For context, trying to stay near here. I teach a data analysis course at the University of Florida, but I also taught the prerequisite quantitative methods course. So basically quantitative methods is like math econ, and then they're moving into data. And so in data, I was noticing that they could not use Excel at all. And so I'm like, well, great, I teach the prerequisite course. I'll just teach them how to use Excel at a very basic level in quant while teaching them math, because the basic putting equals 1 + 1, you know, like very basic Excel skills. They didn't even have that. So I built into the prerequisite class some Excel projects. In these Excel projects, everything is spelled out step by step. They do exactly what I tell them to do. There are screenshots. At the end of the day, the students should have identical spreadsheets to each other, right? Step by step, exactly 100% how to go. And so this is one such project that I developed for that class. And it is a water allocation project, as you're probably reading here. I don't know how in-depth your math econ class goes, but for me, I tried to get to the method of Lagrange constrained optimization with my students. And so students really struggled with interpreting the Lagrange multiplier I found, and I loved the idea of a project that allows them to kind of visualize that Lagrange multiplier in an easier way. Because when you're doing the math, you get so caught up in, oh, I've got to my first order conditions, and then I've got to solve, and then I have no idea what W star is and what lambda is. Like, all of this is crazy. Well, in this project, they do the math, right? They do it by hand, but then they also do it in Excel, right? So they have the total value function, they have the marginal functions, they have the constrained optimization set up. We're allocating water between 2 users in a constrained water setting. Hey, Arizona. We have a constrained amount of water. You only have 50 units of water and 2 users who want that water. How do we efficiently allocate water between these 2 users, right? This is a constrained optimization problem. And so it's really great because then they can see the function play out. They can see the total value function play out, the marginal value functions play out, and then they use the solver tool with an objective function in order to solve for the optimal allocation of water. They do it in a constrained setting, and then I also give them a constraint that's non-binding, so they can see, oh, my Lagrange multiplier now went to 0. What does that mean? And now my water allocation, I'm only using 80 units of water. Oh, well, that would actually be the outcome if I didn't have a constraint. So then they get to see kind of mathematically why it is that they get different things. And they also, I find, especially teaching data, it's really nice to get students to get the same answer in Excel that they got by hand, because then it's like, oh, I'm doing it right, and I could do this in Excel, and then it clicks for them. Why am I doing this by hand? I could do it in Excel. You start to trust a little bit more what Excel does, and you know what's going into that, and then it kind of helps reinforce that knowledge. And I had a little slide here, maybe it was in the wrong order, but what I provide to them is this very detailed assignment. You know, when students first had me for their very first semester, when I first moved there, they're like, oh my gosh, this is 6 pages. I've never had an assignment that's 6 pages long, but it's 6 pages long because I give them so much detail about how to do it. It's very supportive. I show them how to do it. There's a video tutorial. In my class, I had actually a computer lab where we can do this in a computer lab, but that's not strictly required, as COVID showed us. I can also just record videos, and that works just fine. The assignment itself is, this one in particular is really great if you're looking at constrained optimization. But common challenges, of course, is that, you know, again, even once you do all this project and you play with Lambda and you get the sensitivity analysis and you look at it over and over again, just as sometimes, I think it is just a real challenge for them to understand what that Lambda term is and the idea of opportunity cost, right? That next unit. And so even though I try really hard to get them to that point, there's still every semester students who just don't really understand the method of Lagrange, the Lagrange multiplier, and no matter how much I try to hammer it into them. So that's just, why do we make things so complicated in economics? It's, for fun. Anyways, so for the project, I'll provide all of this and anything.
Next up, sort of building on a lot of the discussion that's already been done. I'm happy we need to be close over here. With using Excel, Excel also has some other external kind of plugins that you can install, right? And so At Risk is one of these plugins. And so, At Risk is really useful because it enables analysis where you can bring in Monte Carlo simulations. It allows you to explore extreme possibilities and understand to what extent risks may occur in any given situation. So you can explore these risk and uncertainty issues, and in the end, it ultimately allows you to improve decision-making in a firm setting, thinking about improving profitability, for example. Okay. So it helps you model these risks, explore new opportunities. It's on this white screen. But there's a lot of applications to At Risk. You can use it in the energy sector. You can use it in manufacturing, insurance. And the way I apply it in our Excel class is looking at the financial sector. So, is it okay? I was coming back. Next one. Yeah. So, for example, maximizing investment returns, understanding portfolio risks. Okay. So here's some of these other examples to explore problems. And so this is going through a demonstration. Oh, no worries. Okay, so this is, so At Risk is that plugin. It adds on a new ribbon into your menu bar at the top, right? And so this is what it would look like once you install it. It gives you 3 major groups. The ones I use the most are the defined group, simulation, results group. Define lets you identify key input variables, like those independent regression. All right. It allows you to tell Excel which output variables to track when it's running through those simulations. You can set up the settings in your simulation to run 1,000 iterations, pick and draw numbers within a distribution on your key input variables, and then track the end result on, say, profitability. Okay. And then it generates results, it generates these beautiful graphs to help you illustrate the dispersion of that tracked output variable, say profit. Okay, so let's look at how this plays out in At Risk. And so this is a quick demonstration. Here I'm putting in revenue. I'm building my sort of model. This is a very simple, simplistic basic model of profitability. I've got revenues, I've got costs. All right, I've got $100,000 in revenue. I've got $60,000 here in costs. And so, math tells us profit is going to equal $40,000, right? Deterministically, okay? Now, how do we explore that in a stochastic setting, okay? So the way we do that is we need to know what's the variability in our revenues, what is the variability in our costs. So let me just throw in some basic numbers here, $60,000 in variability for my revenue figure, $20,000 for my cost figure. And so let's tell At Risk to incorporate these figures into the Monte Carlo simulation. Okay, so now I'm gonna simulate this normal distribution, which relies on a mean and a standard deviation. Okay, so I'm gonna go and go up and set up a distribution on this revenue figure. I'm going to define a new distribution. In this case, we're just going to do something simple, set up a normal distribution, but you've got plenty of options. You can pick and choose from many different distributions that fit well with the data you have. And so in this one, I'm setting it up to set equal to this mean of $100,000 in revenue, the basic model I set up in the beginning. Define the standard deviation. It shows you a basic kind of preview of what that distribution of revenue would look like. I do a little bit of magic here and just fill the formula down just like you would in normal Excel. All right, it's still very similar. Calculating that formula for profit. And then let's set up the simulation. Okay, so here are my figures. I'm going to tell Excel, all right, let's track that output profit figure. Right, profit right now at the mean is evaluated at 40,000. All right, it adds in this risk output formula so that the plugin knows, okay, now I need to track this. Let's set up, in this case, put in 100,000 or 10,000 iterations. It runs through, it draws those random numbers based on the distributions you define, and it builds this illustration of what profit would look like. Okay. And so then you can manipulate this illustration. You can tell it, okay, how much, what's the probability that I'm going to make less than $0 in profit? Looks like about 26% there in this first graph, or 25%, 6% of probability I'll make profit between 0 and 150,000, and 4% probability I'll make more than $150,000. So this is pretty cool, right? This runs through and generates these results pretty quickly. This is a bigger version of that graph. So it looks nice. You've got summary statistics down the side here. It'll tell you all 10,000 iterations. You can go through and look at all the percentiles, the skewness, all of this, and you can talk to the students about what each of these measures mean and how to interpret them. And that's a lot of the focus that I have in the course. Software installation, pretty easy, very basic. You just download the executable, run it, install it, and then as soon as you run Excel for the first time, you'll see that risk. There may be a few like welcome steps that you have to go through. Just like Julianne was saying. Mac OS is a problem. It is a significant challenge to get students to either go through the bootcamp utility if they have old versions of Mac OS X, and or go through Parallel, which costs $80. All right, but if they, right, it takes up a section of your, basically a version of your computer that's sectioned off. But there's also virtualware that you can use. That's an alternative as well. There's different versions of the software. There's a 15-day trial. It used to be 30. There's a corporate version, which costs about $2,000 to $3,000. Very expensive, but nice to know that there's a student version. It used to cost $50. Then it went up to $75, and then with more inflation now, $95 a year. Students get it for the whole year. There's no limitations to it. It's just like the high-end $3,000 industrial version, and they get the full pack. So it's not just at risk, but decision tree, a whole bunch of different other software that comes along with it. So in summary, Excel, you can use this at-risk plugin and quickly and easily analyze lots and lots of different possibilities and measure risk within a spreadsheet. All right. This will be available.
I have a quick question. What are students' reactions? Or what's the general reaction?
Well, one of the same challenges with just any at-risk course, a lot at the very beginning, it just looks like magic. You know, just running sorcery on the screen, and like even just simply filling down columns of formulas or locking cells using absolute references. But as they pick up the Excel skills, I kind of have a primer of Excel skills at the beginning, then layer in the at-risk midway through the semester. It gets easier for them. And so using the software, it's not too bad once they have a basic understanding of Excel. And most of the students that take this class come from Misty's class. So they have a lot of the basics, and then they come in and they kind of reinforce it further. Yeah. So and it's a creativity.
level
for Right.
us. This is
Yes.
And I mean, it's been.
Yes. So a little bit of history. It used to be a all-in-person. So you're sitting down with students. You can tell them, okay, you got to press these keys. And this is definitely a troublesome issue. Yeah. But then we moved it all online. So it's a lot more video tutorials, those GIFs, kind of showing those steps. So I have a step-by-step guide tutorial written out, sort of like I think you were describing, and that scaffolding. And then along with that, built-in GIFs to show them, okay, here's what you got to do. It repeats so they can see it again and again and again. Or the videos where they can stop, pause, and try it on their own, then continue. Yes. So the textbook, I think you have a lot of different options of textbooks. I have a different textbook than Misty's, but the textbook I use is $80, I believe. So about comparable for a master's level, I think, in terms of software plus textbook. Other questions? We can discuss
Answering,
further.
I'm gonna fix this. No, you're good. I'm gonna fix this.
I do, but I'll mystery you there.
Okay, yeah, definitely. No problem.
Catherine,
Jen,
is it possible to share my screen when I present?
oh, actually, give me a second. Okay, so you are next. Let me see if I can. Okay, Jennifer, can you try sharing now?
Sure. Give me just 1 second while I.
Okay, perfect. We can see it. And here now you can see everyone.
Great. Can you see the slides okay?
Yeah.
My audio's okay?
Yep.
Thank you so much and good afternoon. I apologize for not being with you all in Anaheim today. I'm really thankful to be able to share in Zoom and I don't want to say recycle, but repurpose and revalue a tutorial of mapping tools in Excel for visual data analytics. This is useful for Excel 2013 and later, where students are guided through the process of using their geographic data to create a map chart in Excel, and then learning that storytelling approach to complement their analytical ability in using data to provide information. So what really motivated this idea from last year when Misty and I put the presentation together was the Purdue employment opportunities for college graduates, and really industry's interest in the communication skills associated with data and increasing levels of data, both in the food, in agriculture, in natural resources environment programs. So students are encouraged to mine data, tease out the appropriate variables that are useful for creating their story, and then communicating that information to a diverse audience. I created a link that I can share in the chat window. I'll share that when I stop sharing my screen to that report. Actually. So as we're teaching students about data analytics, a lot of the challenges are recurrent. Primarily, it seems that there's a lack of some of the prerequisite Microsoft Office basic skills that we're seeing just not being well developed when students come into our programs. Evidence they break out their calculators when we're asking them to calculate anything. So providing some tutorial information for the students as they're moving into higher order learning efforts to create stories using data was really the primary thrust. So I titled this as teaching objectives rather than learning objectives, because from the teacher's perspective, we're trying to onboard students to buy into the value of working through some in-depth data mining and data cleaning and data manipulation techniques that otherwise might seem tedious. And so we're trying to move away from the end of the textbook type of chapter problems and allowing them to personalize some of their data. So we're looking at geographic variables that can be tailored specifically for programs throughout the country, throughout the world, and throughout the topics that we may cover in our different courses. I've got a couple of examples just to show you illustratively. One example is using the NAS data, where the data is pretty basic and familiar for students in an analytical format. Now we're trying to take that data and maybe represent it into a spatial interpretation. So this is county level data of Oklahoma farm operations. Now students are beginning to think about that granular level. How are they parsing out the class statistics, the bin ranges? How are they beginning to tell a story that has relevance to maybe some learning objectives that we're covering in the classroom? In Florida, for example, we might look at, again, this spatial representation and current information related to farms versus acres in Florida. Now we're beginning to think about how we can create diverse student teams, for example, pairing up our students in agribusiness with agricultural education and communication, for example, to create visually appealing infographics that convey information. We might look at different commodity types of operations. And again, giving students some flexibility to think about the density of operations within a particular region. The idea of bringing in time series data and looking at temporal flows of changes within a particular region. And of course, it doesn't have to simply rely just on the state that maybe you're from, but also looking at global analytics and resources other than commodity production, such as water resources that Misty presented earlier, or global food stocks. We have created a website that was shared at the NACTA conference last year, and it has quite a bit of materials. And we found that this is pretty useful to provide tutorial videos, for example, to share with students the motivation for repurposing statistical data into visual interpretations, mapping particular uses like global economics, walking them through the how-to for cleaning data. Students tend to struggle with moving into the real world analytics, from cleaning their data into appropriate level for analysis, and even selecting the appropriate variables to utilize for their interpretation. And then looking at different examples that have been created with some of these geographic statistics. We provided data, and I give Misty a lot of credit for putting together the spreadsheets. It takes a lot of time to clean data, and that's one of the constraints that we face in the classroom, is where are we looking at efficiencies in providing resources, and then where is that trade-off maybe less efficient if we want to give students the opportunity to struggle through some of those challenges. Putting content online through the AETR's website, I think is a fantastic idea, because now we're looking at asynchronous environments where students who are high achievers maybe move through the data fairly quickly, or maybe they have experience from some other prerequisite courses they may have taken, versus the students who are coming in to our courses who really aren't ready for that prime time. They really need to go back and remediate through some of the basic level Excel formula functions and formatting. We put together a lab manual, and it's fairly intensive. We found that this is very effective in building that student confidence to work through the data when you're sharing where to point and click and what the output should look like. What those granular step-by-step mapping features should look like as you're working through the process, and kind of troubleshooting where students may run into trouble. As we know, in those lab environments, it can take all of our time just to work with one or two students who are struggling. Yet when we're repurposing into this asynchronous type of reusable learning objects, we can really begin to move the chain, as it were, for taking big data and transforming it into information that we can use for managerial decision making. So all of this content is online. It's on the website. Additional data that is ready to go is on the website. Other data sets have been curated so that they can be used as a ready to go learning opportunity in your classroom. So with that, I will turn it over to any questions if there are, or back over to Catherine. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions right now? Wait, but I need to reshare. No, that would just be. That's it. So I'm going to just kind of explain some of the tutorials that I have. So I teach an introductory to statistics course, but it's the second series of our stats courses for our college. So we have Principles of Stats 1, and then Principles of Stats 2 is where our hypothesis testing starts. And we can only use Excel in this class. We cannot use Stata or SPSS or any other program. We have to use Excel. One of the things that can be challenging is we get to linear regression, we get to multiple linear regression, and we have to use this in Excel. So we use a data analysis tool pack in Excel that they can just add in. You don't have to download anything. It's just very easy for them to do. So everything that we have goes to the data analysis tool pack. And part of the reason of starting this is this course is actually going to completely change, and we are going to start using R. And I don't want to have to remake all of these videos. I bet people out there have R tutorials, and then I have all these Excel tutorials. If someone wants to use these Excel tutorials, you can just take them and put them into your course. So I have videos on how to actually add in the tool pack, how to do every single hypothesis test we talk about in Excel. So 1 sample, 2 sample. We do chi-square tests. We do ANOVAs with comparison tests, which that is the worst for them because comparison tests are by hand in the sense of like you're doing each individual equation. And then we do go through linear regression and how to set up your linear regression, because it's also very much like VLOOKUP, everything has to be right next to each other, so getting them to understand that. This is a lower division undergraduate course, so it's targeted for undergrads that don't really have much experience with Excel. But within these videos, once we have everything up on a website, which will hopefully be through AETR, I'll have the videos, I will have all of the Excel files that I use for them so that you don't have to be searching for Excel files or having them type it in by hand. And then all of the tutorials have the actual questions in them, and I do have those that I can provide as well. So this is for 200 level stats course. The reason why I started doing these Excel tutorials, well, one, because of COVID and we went online, but two is I always wanted to have the tutorials even before COVID, just never had a reason to actually make them. So I still teach this in person, but this allows students to go back to it at any time. So they have access to it whenever they want to go back and go through the tutorials. 200 and up. Yes. So that's why we don't fit in a computer lab. That's another problem. So they're just watching me do it unless they bring their computer. And this allows them to go back and watch it at any time. So they don't have to actually bring their computer. Yeah. So that's where I'm starting to get very concerned about R with 200 of them. But yeah, so a lot of the problem comes with them actually, this helps them follow along, but making sure that they get the parentheses right is very hard for them to do. So just that can be a bit of a challenge, and hopefully if they follow along the videos that they actually are following along step by step. But it is sometimes really useful to provide them with the equations that they can just copy to, or not like copy and paste, but like written out equations. Sometimes they prefer those. If you just provide them on a slide, they can see where your parentheses are. But those are my biggest challenges. And that's everything. So here's everyone. If you guys have any questions for anyone that presented, feel free to ask.